Tava is only spread through direct human contact. Now, you said that yourself, Sam.
I know what I told you, but now I'm telling you we're facing a new strain. It spreads like the flu.
Impossible.
Fine. Go to the hospital, check it out yourself. Go without a mask, you'll see more clearly. You gotta isolate the sick, and I mean really isolate them, Billy. We gotta get everybody else back into their houses. We gotta keep them there.
We're doing that, Sam.
No, we're not doing it because I just drove through 100 people. And if one of them has got it, then 10 of them have got it. And if one of them gets out of Cedar Creek, Billy, then we're in deep fucking shit.
Did you do it?
I did it. I went and gone done it.
You went and gone done it.
Yeah.
That's a new one. I like that one. You went and gone done it. I'm just currently trying to arrange my windows so that I can see all of. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do.
Are you on Windows 95 or what?
Oh, you know it, bro. Is there any other option? That's my question.
That is it. Windows 95, NHL 95, Dance Mix 95.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, everything ended in the year 1995.
I was 11. Hormones were raging. What a year.
Yeah. I guess I would have been 11 as well. Look at that. Oh, what a special year.
I don't
the
know
raging
if
hormones.
I don't know if I had hormones then, but I think
You're getting started.
I'm trying to remember if. So this is a weird thought, but I think it was maybe grade 6 as I was still wearing sweatpants or something, and it's kind of that age where you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't wear sweatpants to school just because you never know what might happen.
You never know. Yeah,
that's
all you need
you've
to
reached
say.
Your manhood when sweatpants are no longer acceptable in public.
Right.
Except
some people
now I
haven't
do
learned
it,
that.
but.
So I'm calling you out, I guess.
Oh man, I've got some pair of sweatpants that just embarrass the crap out of my wife. They're like a bit too short, so they just kind of like sit around my ankles, and
right.
So the odd time I'll accidentally wear them out to run an errand or something, but
air quotes accidentally.
You're right.
Because you're supposed to wear those things out to run errands, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
If you're wearing them, you better be embracing the fact that you're wearing them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, they're a bit revealing too. So you add those two things together, and it's just like...
Well, this is a conversation I did not anticipate having when recording this episode. So before it goes too far down that rabbit trail, welcome to Growing Up Punk, the podcast about punk rock and all of its friends. My name is David. That guy's Aaron.
My name is Aaron. Here I am.
That's you. There you are, I would say live and in the flesh, but
I mean, over here I am.
Over there, yeah. For me, I see you on a screen. I'm waving at you.
That is as live as it's going to get.
And he doesn't wave back. That's
sorry.
like there we go. I feel like that's like the equivalent of, someone going up for a high five and then you just not reciprocating.
Yeah, sorry. What's funny?
But it's
another random story about waving. So sometimes when I'm driving and someone's like crossing the street, pedestrian or whatever, like instead of just kind of giving them a friendly wave, I'll just kind of keep waving, and it just drives my wife crazy because she just thinks it's so condescending, and she's just like, "Why do you keep waving at them? They just think you're like making fun of them." I'm like, I just like a longer wave.
Because I am making fun of them.
Well, partially it's just like, I don't know. So anyways,
that's fair. Yeah, just that awkward,
the condescending, like, "Hey, are you gonna be done walking slowly in front of me?"
That's fantastic. Anyways, this episode, we're calling this one the quarantine scene because we decided to do something a little bit fun. I suppose I could bring it up on Twitter. I was going to say it was suggested. I mentioned it in our last episode as to who it was suggested by. But it was suggested that we do an episode where we talk about albums that we think people should discover and, kind of hear for the first time, I guess you could say, while maybe stuck inside, while maybe stuck in quarantine. I'm stalling while I try to find who the tweet was from.
It was Mr. Jordan Kellerman.
Jordan Kellerman, yeah, at JoJoFlow25.
JoJo.
There you go. So yeah, he said, hey, you should do this episode where you kind of introduce more bands. And I thought that would be cool, but let's make it even bigger. And so we're going to go bigger here. I'm not sure as we record this exactly how this is going to play out, but we both reached out to a number of different artists and podcasters and said, hey, would you like to be a part of this? And the response was pretty overwhelming. There were a lot of artists and podcasters that were like, yes, we want to be a part of this, and sent stuff in. So all I can say is for sure it's a two-parter. So if you're listening to this part on the day of release, just wait. There will be more, even more coming. So what we're going to do is we are going to share, each of us, 3 albums that we think people should discover. Now, the whole point of this episode is to introduce you to new music. So you don't need us, you don't need myself, you don't need Aaron to introduce you to, bands like Blink-182 or, bands like Green Day or, like those bigger bands that we haven't covered Blink yet, but like those bigger bands that we've covered and whatnot. You don't need us to introduce you to them. So the idea here is more stuff that we think is maybe underrated, that there's a better chance that people don't know that we're going to share. So that's what we're going to do, and that's what we got other podcasters and musicians to share as well. Some pretty great guests that'll be featured. But first, before we get into kind of the episode, I got to ask, man, like what is life like right now in Saskatchewan? That's where you live.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I'm still trying to figure it out. Thankfully, I can still work out of my office. There's only 2 of us there currently, so and there's 2 different floors, so usually I have the upper floor to myself. So I'm very thankful for that, to have a place I can go and work in peace. And I feel like I would go crazy if I was trying to get anything done around the house with the kids running around. And
yeah,
so I feel for all you out there that are trying to still work hard and get things done and keep up with things around the house. And plus sometimes I like working from home, like when the kids are in school. But sometimes it's just really distracting. So it's like, ooh, maybe I'll just take a little drum break, or, I got access to all these snacks or whatever, right? It's just, so it's nice once in a while, but if I have to do it for a month or however long, I think that might be a bit much. So, but I went downtown today to run some errands, and it's pretty bleak down there. Like, go to the bank and everyone's wearing gloves and asking you questions about what you need and making sure you're not coming there or whatever. And
God forbid they ever ask you questions of what you need, hey?
Well, it's just...
Is there any way I can help you today?
Well, no, they're just like, what do you, they want to see if you're doing, like a business deposit or whatever. Because if you're just getting cash or something, they'll just tell you to use the ATM.
Right. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Kind of thing. Like, and so...
Isn't it typical for a bank to ask you what kind of deposit you're making?
Well, I
see what you're saying,
like they actually have staff, like, waiting at the doors when you walk in.
Yeah.
And so, it's just a weird... I'm just not used to it, so it's just a weird feeling. You just kind of... makes me think I'm in like some like protected country or something, or I don't know.
It's weird, man. Like, as of right now here, this is as of when we're recording. This could very well change by the time this episode comes out. In fact, I kind of think it will change by the time this episode comes out. But as of recording on March 24th, 2020, right now we're like, we could still work. Like, it's still all kind of normal. Like, obviously, like the restaurants and bars and that kind of stuff has all changed, but like they haven't shut down. It's not to the point where it's only essential businesses or whatever are running, or you know what I mean. So it's still pretty normal. Like, my workplace, it's kind of reduced hours in the sense that you don't need to be there for the full day. You only need to be there for as much time as it takes you to get your work done. If you want to work from home, you can work from home. But yet there hasn't been anything put in place yet where it's like, nope, you have to stay home. So I go to work for a few hours a day. I stay home in the morning right now, and I kind of help around the house because obviously children aren't in school. And so we're, dealing with that and dealing with life and what that looks like and trying to maintain some kind of routine and whatnot. But for the most part, I get to still kind of go about and do my thing for work each day. But it's this really weird, driving to and from work is this really weird thing where it's like, hold up, we may have to start this again. I'm just like trying to figure out if this is actually recording or not. Oh no, it is.
Okay.
Technical difficulties. It's still going. I was worried for a second there. I was like looking at the wave file, being like, why isn't it still going? So anyways, what I was saying was, yeah, work is, the commute is so much shorter right now because there's less vehicles on the road.
Oh,
They
yeah.
did just announce today that like all the parks and playgrounds and stuff here are closed.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, and that was to be expected. This past weekend was insane because like people can't do anything right now, so everyone was like, "Oh, it's nice out. Let's just go outside," right? And so everyone went to the parks, and it was just like crowded. And we're like, "Well, that kind of defeats the purpose."
Yeah, thankfully the park right by our place has lots of trees that are easy to climb. So there's a nice walking path, and so we just skip the
Yeah.
park and just find trees and throw sticks and paint on the sidewalk and stuff. So yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, no, it's weird. It's like the park is right there. No, you can't go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know like Ontario and Quebec right now, they've shut down like any non-essential work and stuff like that. Like it's basically, I think like from what I understand, grocery stores, gas stations, emergency first responders, like that kind of stuff is
Right.
the only people going to work. Like my wife went to Costco today and she had to wait in line outside because they're only allowing, I think it's 200 people in at a time sort of
Yeah.
deal. So she had to wait out. But she also said at the same point, it was the most like relaxing, calm Costco experience she's ever had. So
She just took her
you know.
time, was in there for hours, just making other people wait. 'Cause
just making people wait. Yeah.
Well, yeah, on Saturday I went by a grocery store and there was a line up, and it was pretty cold here Saturday morning. I was like, I don't
Yeah.
feel like standing up there for half an hour, so I just went to a different store, and they didn't have any lineup, so
Right.
just depending on the
So-
size.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to talk obviously a little more about COVID and all the fun around that because that's kind of the basis for this episode. But before we get into that, this can kind of I guess count too. Have you been listening to any like new music lately? Because we tend to talk about a lot of old music, but music is still happening, right?
Yeah, and there's been some good stuff coming out. So for singles, and I don't necessarily check out a lot of singles unless it kind of catches my attention. I still like waiting for an album. But singles by Northcote, who, if you don't know who they are, you should go check them out. And then also a band called Broadside put out a new single, and they're like a pop punk band that was on Victory, and I listened to them, didn't really catch my attention. They've signed with a different label, looks like they might even have a different lineup, and the new song they put out was really good. It really caught my attention, so I'm looking forward to some of that. For full lengths, a band called the Fizz Gigs.
You're stealing my thunder, but go on. Yeah.
Sorry. Well, even just tonight, as my kids were just having some quiet time reading their rooms, and so I was just sitting in their room, and so I put the album on. I was like, man, I'm really enjoying this. I checked out like their video and a few clips before, and
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a really fun album. It's a simple pop punk album, but it's simple in a good way. There's still enough going on that it's exciting, and so cool band. Go check them out. Some ex-members of a band called Belvedere, which is a much loved punk band in Canada and around the world. So
I think one day we'll talk about them at some point in time.
yeah, well, I had done an interview with Steve from Belvedere, and I forgot or I had some issues.
Technical
so,
issues. But before you move on, I just want to say this is how I described the Fizz Gigs new album. We are the Fizz Gigs. It's impossible to like. I tried multiple times with my like Amazon Echo or whatever to get it to play. I'm like, hey, Alexa, play "We Are the Fizz Gigs" by the Fizz Gigs, and it would play something random. Alexa, play "We Are the Fizz." It's like I could not get her to play the Fizz Gigs.
Yeah, it's not a very convenient album to get. Play by
but I said
speaking.
if you like your pop full of power and your rock bred with punk, then the new record from the Fizz Gigs is for you. It reminds me a little bit or a lot at times of actually CJ Ramone. Just in like the overall vibe, but being more lighthearted, I think, than CJ Ramone. Maybe taking themselves a little less serious, but just the kind of sound on some of those songs, just that sort of straightforward driving, like mid-tempo punk sort of thing. At times it reminds me of like Weezer on Speed.
Yeah,
It's pretty good stuff.
I heard hints of Alkaline Trio too, and just some of the melodies, and you know how again it's a simple band, but they know how to make it interesting. So and then still rocking some of the new Silverstein, new 4 Year Strong, Polaris. I've actually gone back to that Thief Club EP which I'm really liking. So yeah,
Yeah.
lots of good stuff.
Yeah, there is a lot of good stuff. So as I said, I was going to mention the Fizz gigs. They're actually from Calgary too, which is rad. So, fairly close to home. And a couple other things that I've been listening to. So, I want to save that one for last because it has been fantastic. I just can't figure out what the other one was, what it's called. There we go. Race Car Blues by Slowly Slowly. I don't know how I kind of missed out on this one. It's only been out for a few weeks. Like I think it came out in the end of February, but I don't remember any sort of hype around it or anything, and so I'm not 100% sure how it came across my radar. It may have shown up on my like Apple Music, new music playlist, and I was like, "What is this?" And then checked it out and went, "Okay." Especially the record reminds me a lot of the band The Dangerous Summer. They kind of have a similar sort of vibe that automatically makes you feel nostalgic, even though it's brand new music. But it's also, I don't know, the first song, just the way it kind of builds upon itself, I think is so rad and hooks me right from the beginning. The other one that there has been a lot of hype around is actually the new record from Hot Mulligan, which is called, I should have had this up, You'll Be Fine. I'd listened to Hot Mulligan in the past. This record blows it out of the water. Like it is beyond good. And the fact that I think it came out, when did it come out the same week as 4 Year Strong? It came out March 6th. When did 4 Year Strong come out? It was right around there. 4 Year Strong might have been the week after, maybe.
Yeah.
Why is my phone
it might
like
have
this?
even been in the end of February, or was it maybe first week of March? I can't remember.
4 Year Strong. There we go. I found it. 4 Year Strong came out February 28th. Oh, so 4 Year Strong actually came out the same day as Slowly Slowly. Maybe that's how I missed it.
Oh, okay.
Because as soon as Brain Pain came out, I was hooked, which obviously we've talked about Brain Pain. But we just thought we'd talk about maybe some newer stuff we're listening to because most of the time we talk about old music. We are, old dudes who like the music we grew up on, but we also like other music, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Including new music. So that's going to bring us to what we're going to talk about, the quarantine scene. The idea, as I mentioned, is, you may be stuck inside for a long period of time, not getting to see your friends as much, that kind of stuff. So why not take that time to listen to some new music, discover some new music? So we reached out, found some people who said, yeah, we got some stuff we'd like to talk about. So the idea, I haven't listened to all the audio that's been sent in yet. The idea is to discuss 3 albums that you think were kind of underrated or what have you. They're not all punk. I can say that. There's a good heavy dose of punk rock, but there is kind of some variety. So, you'll get into that as we talk and then as we get our guests to talk. But so I don't know how you want to do this. If we want to just kind of go back and forth one album at a time.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So why don't you fire away with your first record that you would like to suggest to the masses of growing up punk family members? That's I don't know.
Yeah.
Socially
I like
distant family members.
Yeah, like my second cousin Gary. You just kind of only see him when he needs something. Just kidding. I don't have a second cousin Gary, but
he's a first cousin.
He's my dad.
He's your dad. And your second cousin? Things just got weird.
Yeah, I'm from a small town.
Yeah, I get it.
Anyways, I don't even know how that would be possible, but
we could figure out the family tree.
All right, that tree has already been used for firewood, so let's move on. All right, my first album is by a band called Far From Heroes, and their album Betrayed You With a Kiss. So this is a band that I originally met when they came and played in Dauphin, Manitoba, and the band I was playing in, we opened for them. They just seemed like such a professional and awesome-sounding band to a guy like me at that time. Who knows if they were or not, but in my mind, they were super pro. They were touring on their EP, It's Only Me You Lose, which was chock full of pop-punk gloriousness in the vein of New Found Glory, Blink-182, and I listened to that EP a ton. So a few years later, when my band started touring, we played with them a few times out east in Ontario, which is where they were from. At this point, they had put out this album, Betrayed You With a Kiss. So I first heard these songs in Dauphin with my friend Jess, because the singer Lee from Far From Heroes had sent him some songs. So Jess was a photographer, and I think had taken pictures of them or something. That was his connection. And the first song I heard was Ashes, and I was completely blown away. I'm sure this situation happened with lots of people back when, when the internet wasn't around, so you'd listen to a band you loved, and you kind of wouldn't hear for a while, and then they would put out new music, and you'd kind of expect one thing, and then you put it on, and it was something, they kind of matured or changed their sound a bit. And so that was the same for Far From Heroes. And typically I don't like when bands do that. I mean, within a certain realm. But yeah, they had changed their sound a bit, and it caught me off guard. Yeah, so the band had built on their solid and catchy songwriting from their previous EP, but their new music had taken a much more serious overtone to the record, with a darker and more dramatic feeling to the songwriting. It's evident on this album lyrically that they were going through some stuff in their personal lives, and some major changes were going on with them. And so that was kind of confirmed, and so I'm kind of spoiler alert, I did an interview with these guys, so it will be coming out sometime. So I don't want to spill the beans on a bunch of info. I'll wait till then. But yeah, this album continues to catch my ear and intrigue me in new ways with each listen. This is a piece of music that I never get sick of listening to, and I think it's a dynamic record, especially for a band that wasn't very big and hadn't got a lot of exposure. And so I always love that with bands that where they just kind of catch you off guard, and in a good way, right? Where you kind of put it on, and it's like, whoa, like this is different, but I immediately like this.
Yeah. I remember hearing the name Far From Heroes. I don't know if I ever saw them. I'm trying to remember, because like when I put it on, it didn't immediately catch me. I didn't recognize it. And I mean, this record's from 2004.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, kind of your band playing shows with them. So around that same time. So I'm trying to remember if in fact I saw them or not, because the name is definitely one that's familiar to me. But putting it on, I was like, yeah, okay. It definitely has a sound, like a similar sound to, what was coming out at that time. I thought it was a good little jam, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, it's I can't think of a lot. I mean, there's bands like Alkaline Trio, like we mentioned, where they kind of, draw on the more darker side of pop punk.
Right.
But I just think it is something really cool of taking something that's not poppy, but still kind of making it poppy in a way that's not poppy. that's a lot of poppies, but it's catchy and hooky, but not in your typical way.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it definitely isn't like, it doesn't have that overproduced sort of vibe going on with it. But yeah, so which songs did you say stood out off that record?
So I didn't go through those yet, but
he's not there yet. Okay, sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
So I also for two of the bands I'm going to talk about, I actually asked them just to briefly touch on a few that so they didn't send in like the rest of the bands kind of thing, but I just asked them just to touch on a few. So this is from Scott, the guitar player, and one of the main writers. So his three favorite songs on the album are Ashes, so that's the opening track. That was the first one I heard. He said, "This is the song that kickstarted this record and its direction. Incredible harmonies, great groove, tempo to rock to on stage." The second one he said is, if she could do the same. So what's cool about this song is it's got two different time signatures in it, which is pretty unique for kind of a pop punk band. So the verses are in 3/4 and the chorus in 4/4, which maybe to some people means nothing. But after I went back and listened, I was like, oh, like it's just kind of one of those things I didn't really pick up on.
Yeah.
But then when I went back to listen, I was like, oh, this is really cool.
I'll say I'm curious to go and listen now, because like that's not necessarily. I enjoy things like that, but if it's done, like I didn't notice it on listening. So sometimes it's obvious when a band has time signature changes, and you're like, oh, okay. And other times it's not so obvious, and so I'm curious to go back and listen to that and see kind of what it does for the feel of the song.
Yeah, it's really cool. So he says about if she could do the same. It's some of the best guitar work on the record. It's got a rockin' bridge, and the chorus is catchy as hell. This third one is Say a Prayer, probably the heaviest song on the record. Love the guitar riff into the intro and verses, great chorus. Jer, one of the band members, brings in the bridge by himself, so fun to play live. I just thought it was cool to hear from the bands themselves kind of what stood out to them, because it's, so
that's kind of cool.
So Ashes was one of my songs as well. It was the first one I heard, And yeah, like I said, I loved how it just caught me off guard, and just a great way to start the album. My second song off of there is "I'd Tell You," but I would have to kill you. And that intro with the drums and the simple riff just gets me right off the bat. I love the dynamic on this song. The verses rein it in a bit, and then it goes full throttle on the chorus, which is super catchy. One of my favorite choruses on the album, and there's a lot of them. Lyrically, this song touches on dealing with the struggles of dealing with the skeletons in your closet and how it will keep eating away at you unless it's dealt with, and the pain that comes with these types of things. And my third song is Tallest Tale. I just love how catchy the guitars are on this album and the song, but in a dark and brooding way. So good. There's lots of spiritual undertones on this song, and there's more about that in the interview. And so it just kind of talks about the inner toil that happens when fighting with ideals related to faith and spirituality. And there's lots on this record that you might pick up with it being called "Betrayed You with a Kiss." There's it's kind of a common story that even if people don't know the Bible, they might know that story about Jesus being betrayed by Judas, and there's a lot of that on this album. So I'm excited for people to hear the interview because they kind of talk about that and what was going on. And
are you like pressuring me to put the interview out? It sounds like you're like, dude, just get the interview out.
Just so people know it's coming, and I'm not just pulling stuff out of the air.
It is coming. But, yeah, Aaron is an interview beast who just hunts them down, and so there are a few that are in the old bank right now. So they'll get out eventually. We just keep on trucking, just you and I though. Yeah,
but this album really stands out because of that. Like when you listen to it, I like that it makes you think of something. So when I've listened to it, it's like, well, I know they're not a Christian band, but a lot of the lyrics are kind of pulling from different things that I know to be from, Bible stories or whatever. And so it's really intriguing just to hear kind of how they put that into the music. And
I'm just so curious. Like, did you guys tour with them out west at all?
No, not that I know.
I'm just
of.
trying to.
Like, they toured out west a number of times. So,
because the name, every time you've mentioned it, I was like, yeah. And then I wasn't sure if it was just in the back of my head because being a band that was around in the scene. But now that you point out that they're Canadian, I'm like, no, I'm sure. Like, I must have heard of them through like local scenes and what have you. And I mean, maybe I did see them at some point in time. And, just kind of forgot, because there's a band I was trying to think of the other day that I was like, I can remember seeing them once or twice when we were talking about The Used, because they reminded me of The Used, and I can't for the life of me think of their name. And I'm like, there's a chance you played shows with them, but what can you do?
Yeah, well, they were on a West Coast based label called Spawner Records. Okay. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that or not, but so they were out that way quite a bit.
Yeah, so it's possible. I'm sure I just heard the name as it went around. But so Far From Heroes, Betrayed You with a Kiss. Aaron says go listen to it. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I've been,
no, I shared all that to say, no, don't listen to it.
I've been listening to that album for 16 years now, and it's still, every time I go back to it, it's always so
you
good.
said 16 years. I thought you said 60. I was like, your math is impeccable.
60 years this band has been ruining my life.
So did you have any other notes on that record?
That's it. Yep.
Okay.
Go check it out.
So something interesting for me is that, so you mentioned that, you asked them to provide, just some insight into some of the songs or to pick some of their own favorites or what have you. I very well could have done the same thing for my first record on the list, but instead I did just get a guy from this band to submit his three quarantine records or whatever.
Awesome.
The first album that I want to talk about actually came out it's a couple years older than your record. It came out in 2001. It's No Motive's Diagram for Healing. No Motive is a band that, they've come up a few times on the show. Obviously, had an interview with Roger Camaro of No Motive, a few months back. And spoiler alert, he's a part of this whole thing as well. He's got his records that he's going to share with you.
Yeah, awesome.
And so this record specifically, when I had Roger on before, we were talking about their record "And the Sadness Prevails," which just celebrated 20 years. So this record specifically, though, was actually, at the time, if you would have asked me, what's your favorite record, this was it. when it was out.
cool.
This was the album that was at the top of my list. And it's funny because No Motive was never really a band. Like when listening to your interview with Rob Kucherek of Autopilot Off, he had mentioned, they were kind of always viewed as like the band's band, right? Like they were always opening for all these other artists, and they would do their own headlining things, but it'd be much smaller. And I feel No Motive was kind of the same in that respect. They signed to Vagrant Records, which was in the early 2000s, obviously was huge, with acts like the Get Up Kids and Dashboard Confessional, just to kind of name a couple. They signed before all those artists, but then almost kind of got lost in the shuffle, I think, with Get Up Kids, Something to Write Home About coming out, and eventually Dashboard Confessional and stuff, and like just blowing up in that regard. And No Motive just kind of got left behind a little bit. And this record, though, I mean, it's one of those ones. I have a few records that as soon as I put it on, I'm in a very specific place listening to it. I can picture being in that place, and this is one of them. And but yeah, a few of the songs off this record that have always stood out to me is one, Celebrate, which is the opening track. I just like the way this album opens. Like as soon as it kicks in, it's full steam ahead, which isn't necessarily what No Motive is. Like they were always kind of a band that that played with different tempos and dynamics and whatever. But yeah, this first one, it's just like the drums are just ba ba ba, just like going or whatever, and the guitars are just kind of hitting these big open chords, and then it just sort of all comes back together and then takes off from that first verse. And it's a great way to kick off the album. It's full of energy, full of optimism, I find, in the lyrics, unless I'm like missing something. It's very possible that he's like the chorus about celebrating is more, it could be more cynical. I don't know. Just when I hear it, I'm like, yes, that's what I kind of picture. Another track, it was hard to pick 3 tracks off this record.
Yeah, I found the same with mine. So
yeah,
that's fair.
But like the song Get a Life, I just love like the guitar riff into the intro, because it kind of does one riff into another riff. It's super catchy, and mid-tempo pop punk song. The chorus always gets stuck in my head, and it just seems to be a song about the sacrifices made, and maybe you can speak to this, to pursue your dreams of being a band on the road. Right? Like he talks about,
for sure.
How, you got to break the bank just so you guys can eat because you're playing, these small shows, living out of a van, but also like missing, you're seeing all these things, but missing the people back home that matter to you and whatnot. And it's just kind of this, he's a song where, he's sitting there thinking, should I get a new life? Basically, like when you hear the song Get a Life, my initial thought is like him saying to someone like, man, get off my back, get a life. But he's talking about, I'm missing all these things and all these sacrifices I'm having to make. Is it time for me to get a new life? Is it time to kind of like settle down, move on past this? And I mean, they had a couple more records come out. They had another full length and at least one other EP, maybe 2 EPs come out after this record. So he didn't obviously quit right then and there in writing this song.
Yeah.
But, and then the final song that always stood out to me is Born Again, which is the last song on the record, and the guitar work on this song, again, how it starts, and then it's got this intro riff and then the verse riff. It kind of creates, like I think it's the slowest song on the record, but it kind of creates a feeling of closure in the music, which again is great because it is the closing song. And the meaning I take from it, could be wrong again, is kind of moving on from your mistakes in the past and realizing that tomorrow is still ahead of you. And I think I had read something somewhere that Pat, the singer, I think Pat the singer, now I'm questioning myself, the singer of the band anyway, no, Jeremy, I think is, whatever, I didn't look that up, but he, I used to know at one point in time, but I read somewhere that this song was actually about how his parents didn't plan to have him, sort of thing. Like he was sort of a surprise or whatever, and how he was seeing it happen in someone else's life and how it changed their life. But it like almost has this like initially kind of, maybe it's the take, it's this weird song if that's the story behind it, right? Like, because he writes it from his, I just think it's like looking at anything you've made and realizing there's still hope for the future. And I mean, maybe you could tie that into someone getting pregnant and being like, oh, shouldn't have done that. But then also going like, well, I mean, a child is a miracle sort of thing, right? Like,
right.
And seeing the hope in that. But yeah, all in all, this record, I still love coming back to it. The artwork I think is pretty great. It's it reminds me of a few different records, a few different bands on the label at that time. But
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, it's always been one of those records that stood out to me.
Yeah, I think my favorite song off of that, which wasn't one of yours, I think it was called "Numb." Is that?
Okay, yeah, I think that's a song. I'm gonna.
Which it must have been on a sampler or something. But
Yeah, it's called "Going Numb." But yeah,
Going Numb,
well,
yeah. Because as
I'll
soon
allow
as as soon as it started, I was like, "Oh, I know this song." So
Yeah.
I don't know. So yeah,
Like,
which was a great song.
No Motive is one of those bands where I wonder, like, what is it that held them back from going to that next level? Because I mean, they had a great producer. They worked with Trevor Keith at least for the album before this one and this album. I don't know if Trevor from Face to Face was involved in their third full length or not, which actually may not have. Their third full length on Vagrant, we'll say, because I think they had one or two full lengths before signing to Vagrant. And I'm not sure if he was involved in that last one or not, but I mean, like I think the songs were all really good. I just wonder what it was that sort of held them back from being, they got on some good tours and it just never really, same with Autopilot Off, I guess, just never really took that next step, it seems.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's one of my favorite questions to ask bands when I'm interviewing them, and it's sometimes hard to do it and not sound condescending.
Right.
But
why do you think you didn't get as far as you did?
But it's just an intrigue. Like, why does one band that sounds this more or less the same, right? It's just, but there's so many other aspects that play into it, and that's just how it goes.
I think part of it is probably even just like image, because you look at some bands, and I know, I think it was the Autopilot Off interview. You'd brought up Good Charlotte. And like musically, I feel like, Good Charlotte did do something that was a little bit unique in their sound, like in that pop punk realm that I think set them apart in like, they kind of incorporated a little bit of, I don't know if you'd call it rap, but that influence was definitely there in their music, which I think set them up. But they also had like an image. Yeah. That image was kind of all over the place. Like the Madden Bros, like, was it Benji was like the one with like 100% punk rock kid, and then you had like the one guy who looked like he should be in a new metal band, and then they had like all these different, but they almost like, it felt like they had these images from all the different like scenes that were peaking at that time. Yeah. And so they like, and a bit of a unique sound, whereas like No Motive, I think, this is a great record, but maybe they didn't quite have that forward image. They all just wore, it was standard fare at the time though. It was like black Dickies, black shirts was kind of their vibe, right? But
and there's lots of bands like that. It seems like the bands that are I don't want to say actually good, but I mean like bands that are often really talented and gifted. They care more about the art of the music and creating than they do an image. Unfortunately, media wants the image too, and so lots of times if it doesn't happen naturally, then it just doesn't happen because that certain crowd isn't attracted to that look or whatever. So again, just part of the machine.
I would say if you're sitting at home and you're going to be spending a lot of time at home and you haven't listened to Diagram for Healing by No Motive, go listen. This is the great thing about being self-isolating, quarantine, whatever, just spending time at home these days, is that with streaming services, like all of these albums that we're recommending are for sure at your fingertips. Yeah. If you're signed up for any streaming service. Could you imagine? It would be so different if this was even like, 10 years ago?
It's like, I'll burn you a CD and mail it to you if you like it.
Yeah. Yeah. So here we are. But anyway, let's get into your second record that you want to bring up.
Yeah, so I've got a little bit of a longer intro on this one too, mostly for these first two, just because was really connected with not only the albums but the bands as well, and so just have a bit more, I guess, insight from these two. But so I also reached out to my buddy Murray, who is the guitar player and singer of Every New Day, and so this is what he had to say about their album, The Shadows Cast. It was a point in time where as a band I felt really close with the guys, both in rehearsals and on tour. We rehearsed every single day except Christmas Day. Unless we were playing a show, we also did personal practice every day. At the time of writing, the way most songs came about were me writing the bass riffs, and then Scott and Matt, who are the bassist and the drummer, were so instrumental in putting everything together and making everything into a smooth flowing song. I remember them talking about this back then, as how they all played a really big part in forming the songs together, which was pretty cool, because often it's just whoever's writing the song or the riffs just kind of puts it together and everyone else just kind of adds their parts. Our musical influences were expanding, and I think it came out in our writing. From punk rock to incorporating older rock like Rush and Boston, plus some hardcore type stuff like Killswitch Engage and Comeback Kid. There were also bands like Thrice that were in heavy rotation we listened to. Matt was getting into a bunch of stuff, both heavy and lighter, that influenced him. We also had some classical music influences from the metal we were listening to, like Stratovarius and Children of Bodom. As the album was getting closer to over half done, we wanted to have a complete sounding album where not every song sounds the same, and we tried writing songs with different tempos, and at the time for me I felt like they were the weaker songs, but now listening back I'm more proud of them. We tried to add some variety with different time signatures, which we thought would engage the listener and were fun and challenging for us. And I agree with all those comments. I think that's why this album has been so crucial for me, because it's not just another melodic kind of hardcore metal tinged album. There's, like you said, the different influences, from old bands that I don't really know anything about, but now that I go back and listen, I can hear those influences. So that's why I like getting these insight from the band, because there's things like that I wouldn't just pick out and be like, oh, that's a Rush influence. Like, I have no context for what a Rush influence would even be. So it's cool to hear how they incorporate that into this kind of a genre. So
yeah. It's interesting, before you continue, that he mentioned kind of almost like throwing it aside, but that Thrice was in heavy rotation, because when I hear this record, all I hear is The Artist in the Ambulance. Not saying, oh, all I hear is a band ripping off The Artist in the Ambulance, but there's so much on this record that I'm like, man, this sounds like Thrice. And Every New Day is an interesting band, because the first time I saw them, they were basically like a skate punk band. Yeah. And if I recall, like in between every song almost, they like played little like AC/DC riffs, just kind of like probably as they're like transitioning. Yeah. And then the next time I saw them, this record was out or was coming out or whatever. And I was like, what? This is not the same band, but like it can't be. But for sure, yeah, it is. It actually... Every New Day is one of the only bands that did any sort of touring that I recall that I like any of my bands actually played with. We played a show with Every New Day.
Oh, cool.
And it was one of my favorite shows we ever played. Didn't end up trashing our gear, but we had this, like, at the end of every set, actually, going back to, when you interviewed Sick of Change, we had a song called These Shattered Lives, and the song title came from the Sick of Change album title, right? And it sounded very different, but it would always end in chaos. And that particular show where we played with Every New Day, I just remember my drummer, like, we were like throwing instruments down and whatever, and he just like leapt over his drums and like clotheslined me and like cut me above my eye, and like people were like coming up to us afterwards to be like, that was insane. I'm like, yeah, we can't really afford to do this. Like, a crack. For whatever reason, I was playing a hollow body guitar, and it was like cracked after that show, like all the way around the body of the guitar. It was just like, that was a dumb choice. But anyway, Every New Day, yeah. When you brought this album up, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about this record, and put it on. And it's one of those records where you put it on and you turn it up, and then by the time you're about 30 seconds into the first song, you turn it up more. Yeah. And then that song finishes, you get on to the next song, and you turn it up. Like, there's a few records where I just feel like it's not loud enough. I just need to keep going louder. This is for sure one of them. But share the three songs that you picked off the record.
Yeah, and I also, I got so many good things to say about this band, but what's cool about them is we kind of came up, so the band I played in came up at the same time with them, so we would play with them in Winnipeg and Dauphin and Yorkton, kind of all over. So it was really cool to see the progression of them. But what was always kind of really frustrating about them is they were just always so much better than every other band of their peers. Like, even when they were just like doing the kind of like skate tech punk stuff, like they were just always, they're one of those bands where every player was just naturally gifted. and it just
So-
came out. And
Yeah, was Murray the guitar player? Did you say that?
yeah, guitar player and
Yeah.
lead singer.
So it's interesting to me because there's a parallel I draw between you guys, like Means, when the first time I saw you guys play, and Every New Day, is that both Matt, like Matt Good from Means and Northcote, whom you mentioned earlier, and Murray from Every New Day, I was just always blown away by the fact that these bands would come with a single guitar player and sound so ridiculously full and heavy. Because like Matt wrote sick riffs too and was able to sing over top of them and just like feel like some bands would show up and they'd have one guitar player and you would notice, right? It'd be like, oh, guitar, bass, and
Right.
drums, and you would notice there was something missing. Matt and Murray, which Matt Murray is the name of an NHL goaltender, by the way. Yeah, but I just remember seeing shows by you guys and by Every New Day and just being like, standing there being like, how do you make your music sound so full with just one guitar player, especially just like, playing these small venues, not a huge, like PA because you're playing a big show.
Right.
Like the first time I saw you guys play, I did sound for the show and it was in a curling rink, right? Like playing like small venues. And in fact, maybe the first time I saw Every New Day as like what they would eventually become was in the curling rink as well. But anyway, yeah, just being blown away by just the sick guitar work.
Yeah, well, and Murray was, he was a step above. I'm not trying to say Matt Good wasn't, but I mean, the riffs on this album are a lot more technical than we ever were, and they had a lot more metal influence and different things. So, yeah, it was crazy how we could play that and sing at the same time.
I also hope we're confusing people just by dropping Matt Good as a name, as if it's not like how many people are going, you're talking about like the guy who played Hello Time Bomb?
Yes,
No,
that's the
not
guy
Matt.
that I played with in a hardcore band.
Not Matthew Good. No, Matt Good. Look it up. He's so much better.
Yeah.
Although I do
Anyways,
like
yeah.
Matthew Good too.
All right, let's keep this going. Yeah, they were a band that ended too soon, but I'm glad. And they've got an album after it, which is also awesome. However, it's not on streaming. Boo. So if you need
get
it,
on that.
hit me up and I'll send you a burnt copy, or
You
can call me on the phone and I'll just sing you the riffs or something.
Just play it over the phone.
Yeah. All right, hour-long phone call. Let's do this. All right, so the first song I have is the first track off the album, Break the Mold. A great opener to the album, like we said, and it just gets right to it. The gang vocals start off the song yelling, "Take the reins." An onslaught of speed, aggression, melody, and technicality that is rare for melodic hardcore bands. Now, I couldn't find the lyrics online, and I have the CD somewhere, but I couldn't find where it was to actually look at the lyrics for this album. But yeah, it seems like they're talking about things in your life that will help to break you out of the mold that so many people succumb to in life, which is kind of fairly typical for bands in this area to sing about, being different and not fitting into the mold. So there you go. First song, Break the Mold. It's a ripper.
It's a ripper. It really is.
The second song I have is Ashes Fill the Air. What a dark and broody song title.
Unless are they just sitting around a campfire? That's what I assume.
They're just smoking lots of cigarettes, like
A nice, yeah. I like the idea of them hanging around a nice summer campfire.
It's like, what's the craziest riff we could do right now?
Right.
Yeah, this they knew how to immediately engage you with their songwriting and dynamics within their songs. There's some really cool timings in this song, like you mentioned before, within the drum patterns and the bass riffs. In the middle of the song, it completely takes a turn with a violin playing with just the drums, and then just rips right back into a killer riff. This band incorporated some really unique elements like this into their music, and to me, that's what made them stand out. So there's a few parts on this album where it does that, where it just kind of stops fairly immediately and goes into a different part, not so abruptly that it throws you off, but it's just like, whoa, like what's happening right now?
Right.
But those are the parts where they're saying like they kind of threw those other influences in, which was just so different for any band back then. Like no other melodic hardcore band was playing violin or like slower parts in their songs. The last song I have is Final Breath. And same things to be said of this song, just killer riffs and drumming. There's an awesome fast double kick part in this song. So when we used to play with them, when they would play this song, I would like throw myself on my back and kick my feet up in the air as Matt was doing the double kick parts, just to be an ass, I guess. But it would always make them crack up when they were playing, and so I just like to kind of try throw them off.
Yeah.
But yeah, this song also includes a cool musical bridge that really breaks up the song. Yeah, not a lot to add concerning the lyrics on these two, but Murray was a really cool lyricist and always seemed like he put a lot of thought into the songs he was singing.
Yeah. I think the song that stood out for me off this record and always has is Our Hearts Bleed.
Yeah,
Just when like
so good, too.
when the gang vocal comes in, I'm just like, yep, all right, Our Hearts They Bleed or whatever. I'm like, all right, let's do this. But yeah, such a good record from start to finish. And I'd kind of actually forgotten about it. So the fact that you brought it up, I was actually super pumped on. So good record. Good choice, Aaron. Aaron says if you're in quarantine, listen to this record every new day.
Wow, these are albums that, I mean, anytime anybody's ever asking something, it's like, go check these out, because they're, again, I can't remember what year this came out, but it's still as good now as it was 10, 15 years ago or whenever. 2005, I think.
What does it say? 2005, according to
2005.
Apple Music anyway.
Yeah,
that
so-
sounds right.
So
sounds
15
right.
years of a pure shreddiness.
Shreddiness. Get your shreddies on. I like shreddies. Now, do you eat shreddies?
I like honey shreddies.
Okay.
I
I was going
like-
to say my next question was going to be if you do eat shreddies, do you put sugar on them?
No, I'd never add sugar on any cereal.
Well, except that you just claim that you like eating sugar
Well,
cereal. That's why you don't put sugar on, because you're already eating sugar cereal.
Right, that's true. But yeah, I never like adding, like, it just tastes
Right.
nasty to me then. It just tastes like fake sugar gritty in my teeth.
See, that's fair. If it's shreddies, I'll put some sugar on that. That's some good business for me. The record that next one I'm gonna talk about actually came out 2 years prior to Every New Day. So every time you mention an old record, I'm like, I'm going to mention an older record.
Nice.
2003, yeah, and it's the album Loses Control by Hey Mercedes. And it's funny because this album wasn't one of my original picks for, my 3 quarantine records. And then out of nowhere, I was like, man, I want to listen to that album. And then as I was listening to it, I was like, oh yeah. And that's how this record works for me. It's always out of nowhere. I'll get this this itch where I want to listen to Hey Mercedes, and I'll put it on. Now, it snuck up on me this time, and it snuck up on me the first time I heard it. I for sure bought it. It's a record that I bought because of the cover art. It's basically just like a guy walking towards the camera and looking back over his shoulder. And I don't think it's obvious if he's looking at anything in particular. It looks like it's a long hallway sort of thing. So who knows what he's looking back on, but it was an intriguing cover to me all the same. And I was like, and I saw, again, this is another record that was on Vagrant Records, which was probably at the time that these records were coming out, like my favorite label that I kind of kept going back to. And this band actually formed out of the ashes of another band, which was kind of an iconic emo band of the 90s, that being Braid. And one of those members was in Braid is also in Hey Mercedes was Bob Nana, that's just a great name, Nana. And he's the vocalist and songwriter. And so that kind of carries over. So there's definitely some similarities between Braid and Hey Mercedes. But his songwriting is one that I've kind of underappreciated. I think I have some favorite songwriters that I could list off and be like, oh, this guy, this guy, this guy. But Bob Nana is one of those guys where when I listen to Hey Mercedes and anytime I listen to Braid and whatnot, where I'm like, the things he does with his words, which sounds funny to talk about a guy, lyrically or whatever, but yeah, the things he does with his words is what makes him a good lyricist. It's just kind of like he definitely has his own style. There's some guys who are good writers, but it could maybe be anybody or reflect anybody, whereas Bob Nana, I think, does some pretty unique things. And he's also got this kind of subdued voice, but the music is energetic. It's even the slower songs aren't full on slow jams, really. They're more mid-tempo. But so my favorite songs on this record, again, it was another one that was hard to pick. That's kind of the point. But the 3 songs I picked were, first and foremost, Playing Your Song. Now, I don't know why this song first stood out to me, but I've always loved it. I originally thought it was a song about a guy building up the nerve to go after a girl, but when I look at it closer, it's clearly it appears to be about a guy who is who's seeing multiple girls and trying to keep them all separate, right? Where he's like, you know, he's taking this one girl home. Yeah, taking this one girl home, but meanwhile he's got another relationship over here and it's all kind of like falling apart, I think. And the whole like the chorus where like, go on, you're watching her walk away, you know, the radio's playing your song, is like, it sets this scene of like in a movie, you know, where like the underdog guy who's been looked over, who's trying to finally get that girl's like, you know, amping himself up, like the radio's playing my song, I got to say something to this girl, and finally gets the nerve to do it, which is why initially I thought that's what the song was about. And then I'm like, wait a minute, these verses are painting a picture of this guy just being like, I got girls, you know, I'm trying to keep them all separate. But so who knows? Another song that always stood out to me was Knowing When to Stop, which I think is the next song on the record, if I remember. And it's just got like, the best way I could describe the vocal delivery on the verses is like a smooth rhythmic delivery. It gets stuck in my head. And the song is a prime example, I think, of Bob's songwriting skills, the way he uses similar words to start the verses, or even sometimes the same word. Like the first verse is left arm, left numb is like how it starts. And then the second verse, he says, we fund the function. And I'm just like how he's like using these repeating sounds to kind of build on his verses and whatever. It's just kind of it helps for it to stick in your head. And I don't know what the song's about. I didn't even bother to try, but I always just was intrigued by the last line in the chorus or whatever was said. The hardest part of play fighting is knowing when to stop. I'm like, okay, like. All I could picture is like, is he like talking about like wrestling with his brother when they were younger kids or something? I don't know. But, and then the final song on this record that stood out to me, not the final song on the record, but the third song I picked is actually Unorchestrated. And I didn't know the name of this song for the longest time until now, actually, and I looked it up. But every time it comes on, I'm always like, oh, I really like this song. And it's again, one of the more mellow ones. It starts with kind of like this bass line that's almost like it's mellow, but almost like not haunting, but like dark sort of sound that goes with it. But then the song comes in and you're like, oh, it's like doing this thing in the background. And the music up front is just kind of like nice. And it's a beautiful piece of music. And lyrically, as far as I can tell, it's a song about someone dying in a car accident and how it affects the people kind of closest to that person. But yeah, this record, again, it snuck up on me in preparation for this. I will say the original record I was going to suggest, which will be like a bonus suggestion, was the album Are We Really Happy With Who We Are Right Now by Moneen, which also was released on Vagrant Records. So that's funny. Yeah. But this one snuck up and I was like, no, I got to talk about this one because it's every time I put it on, I'm like, dang, why isn't this record in more of a rotation for me? Because it's just that good.
Yeah, this is a band that I specifically remember Matt when we were on tour listening to. He liked a lot of those Vagrant bands. Another one was Hot Rod Circuit that he had on a lot. Which when you first said "Hey Mercedes," I thought it was Hot Rod Circuit, and then it wasn't.
Hot Rod Circuit's good too. They were actually, one of their album covers was one that popped into my mind when I was describing the No Motive cover.
Yeah, the girl on the cover.
And they were good, but I always felt like they lacked something. But whereas like for me, anyways, Hey Mercedes, I love them, but continue.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I enjoyed listening to this album today. It's kind of in the category of great album when I'm listening to it, but I don't know if I would ever go and choose to listen to it, which there's lots of albums like that just because there's so much music out there. Yeah, it was a pleasant surprise. I was, I had it on at work today and I was like, man, this is a cool album.
Yeah, I don't know how to describe it. Like the way you put it there. Well, I mean, I do go out and choose it, but it's not one, like I said, that's always a top of mind, right? When I'm like, what do I want to listen to? All of a sudden it'll just like come up and be like, oh, I want to listen to this record, and then I got to listen to it. So it's strange that way, but So what's your final record?
Final one is by a band called Staring Back, and the album is called On. I can't even remember when I first heard this band. I'm pretty sure it was probably on mp3.com. So this came out in 2002, so that would probably line up with with when mp3.com and those kind of sites were putting, because I remember hearing Thrice on that on mp3.com as well, and it was
Right.
probably around there. So yeah, this came out the year I graduated. I don't remember if I got the album right away or not, but I do know that I've had some edition of this album off and on since then, whether on burned CDs or on an old iPod or on streaming now. It's a very unique album to me. It definitely fits into the pop punk era of that time, but just sounds different to me than any other band from them. They incorporate some more technical instrumentation than most of their peers. They've got some more kind of emo-leaning parts in the album while still keeping up the energy of the rest of the album. Every time I listen to this, I think, man, there's so many cool parts on here, and I always want to listen to it again right after I've listened to it. It keeps me coming back, so that's why this album stood out to me.
Yeah, I'd never actually heard of these guys before you mentioned them. But upon first listen, I was like, okay. Like, it definitely starts, like, as the record begins, it's kind of one of those sounds where I'm like, yeah, okay, it sounds like about right for the time. But it's also a record for me that I think just in my brief history with it now, saying like, oh, I want to go back and check it out a little closer. But yeah, I never even got like caught wind of these guys, heard whispers of their names. So it's pretty rad.
Yeah, they were on a smaller record label called Lobster Records, I believe, which had a handful of really cool releases on it. Yeah, so again, I don't remember how I came across this band, but I mean, this album's been out for 18 years now, and so, you know, if I'm still listening to it now, then there's something in there, you know,
Yeah.
for myself and hopefully for others. So my first song is Version 2.0, which is the first song on the album, and this is also the first song I remember hearing on it, and it just instantly hooked me with the chunky guitars, with cool guitar leads and drumming that never stays the same beat for too long, which makes this a perfect opening song. Lyrically, it leans into the importance of having people in your life that make you want to be a better version of yourself, which is always a good thing to have people around you that don't make you just feel stagnant, but challenge you to be version 2.0 of yourself.
There you go.
Yeah. Second song is Feel Past the Words. Really cool opening guitar riff. There's lots of them on this album, and that's why it stands out too, especially for kind of like I said, that the being in the pop punk kind of genre. There's a lot of really cool kind of riffy guitar parts on here versus just kind of power chord. You know, even lots of times it sounds like they're playing the chords like full chords versus just power chord. Like it just kind of has that more kind of full sound to it. It just has a different feel to it, not your typical band of this genre. I love that no parts get stagnant as they switch up the parts on this song and the album quite often. Not so much that it confuses the listener, but like I said, when I listen to this, I'm like, man, I forgot about this part in this song. Like that's a really cool way to add to this song. Really interesting overall. So that's why I chose this one.
Yeah.
It was hard to pick three in here because as I was listening through everyone, I was like, oh, this one's got a cool part that I like. And
Yeah. It was a difficult practice to do for sure, especially looking at albums that are like, you know, that you've listened to a ton, right, over time.
yeah, well, I mean, that's why we think they're underrated because we've listened to them so much and we want other people to enjoy them. And so it's just, that back and forth. My last song is 5 Years From Now. I can't remember what the rest of the title is. It's kind of a longer title.
I think was it Me 5 Years From Now?
Oh, yeah, Me 5 Years From Now or Somewhere Else.
Oh, yeah,
or,
and then it's, what does it say? Me 5 Years From Now. It's not moving. It's not scrolling. I wanted it to scroll. Oh, there we go. Somewhere Else. That's it. Me 5 Years From Now, Somewhere Else.
There you go.
It is a long title. Yes, you're correct.
Yeah, so this one is super catchy and a unique start to this song with soaring melodies and chunky guitars. I love the guitar tone on this record. Overall, I actually thought every time I listened, like, this is a really good sounding record for being from 2002. Even like last week when we were talking about, The Used and Story of the Year, like those were good sounding records. But for a small band like this to have a record that sounds so big and full, I didn't look to see who produced this album, but I think that's what helps it stand out so much later, right? There's some albums you put on, it's like, okay, this sounds a lot worse than I remember, but for nostalgia reasons, I still love it. But this one is like, man, this one still sounds really good.
Yeah. Can you tell what the artwork is?
It's like a radio speaker or something.
Yeah,
or
I was
like
trying
a
to figure it
shower
out.
head or something like that.
Yeah, it's something. It's something. But yeah, did you have any other notes on this record?
No, that's it.
So Aaron, Aaron is suggesting if you're in quarantine, Staring Back is the name of the band. The record's called On, and yeah, it's definitely worth a spin. My final record is actually one that I've been known to say is my all-time favorite album. This would be the self-titled record from Moving Mountains. This band is interesting to me because they started out kind of doing like post-rock meets post-hardcore sort of thing. That morphed into more of like an all-around Thrice type sound, which is great because we mentioned Thrice earlier. And then finally this record where it got some, post-rock elements back along with like indie and emo and folk elements. It's kind of got a bunch of different vibes to it. To say this record is moody in sound would probably be an understatement. It's definitely a record that I put on and immediately I think of like, oh, I just want to be, taking a long drive at night sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely got a vibe to it. So the songs that I picked, and this is a record that I definitely overspent on the vinyl, because as I was like falling in love with this record, I was like, oh, I actually want a copy of this on vinyl. And the only one I could find was like, at the time was like 60 some bucks on Amazon. And then shortly after that, I found a pressing that was like $30. And I was like, well, I have it. So we're good to go.
Yeah.
But it's also one of those ones where I was like, I don't care. I want this record on vinyl sort of thing. And I think it's going to sound incredible. So, but yeah, the songs that we're going to get into, that I picked off this record being Swing Set, which is the first song. And I know as soon as the song comes on, I'm going to be listening to this album from start to finish. Like there's no choice.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm like, oh, I'm just going to put this song in and then move on to something else. If any of these three songs specifically come up, if I'm just like have it on shuffle or something, or like whatever, playing your personal radio on Apple Music or what have you, and it comes on, I'm going to be like, stop. I'm going to go listen to this record. And this one for sure, start to finish, it signals that to me. Everything just feels so like fleshed out and executed to perfection. And I'm not entirely sure what this song is about lyrically. I think at this time, the singer, the songwriter was talking about moving on because on their previous albums, they covered a lot about the death of a friend. And like that took up a lot of his songwriting. And he spoke, I believe it was this record where he kind of stopped writing about that. He was sort of getting out from beyond that, which is cool. But the feeling I get from this one is just one of the writers saying he's there for someone if they need him. The song kind of starts mellow, and then as it like gets into the chorus or whatever, it sort of opens up. Like it just feels like, kind of more energy comes in, more pieces come in, and it just comes together. And then it kind of goes back, and it does this kind of back and forth dynamic thing. But yeah, the next song on the record that I want to talk about is actually, as I said, I've been known to say that this is my all-time favorite album. If someone asks me, what is your favorite song of all time? I know there's probably a lot of thought to put into that to actually pick one, but hands down, this is the song I say every single time, and it's the song Eastern
awesome.
Leaves. Yeah, Eastern Leaves. Easily my favorite song of all time. And the bridge melody on this song is actually lifted, at least in my mind. Maybe it's not intentional. It sounds way too similar. It's actually lifted from another one of their songs from their previous album, Waves. And it does this thing where, the song kind of has one feeling that it's going with, where it's, again, like subdued and maybe feels a little more depressing, I guess you could say, in the vibe. And then the bridge hits. And even though the lyrics, I think, maybe aren't getting any happier, the sound just feels more hopeful. It's one of the few songs in recent years that I've actually learned to play on guitar, like start to finish. I don't really do that a lot.
Yeah.
But I was like, this one, I just had to. And yeah, it's got this really neat, like, release sort of feeling as it gets into the end of the song, where it's like, you're almost waiting for that part of the song to come up. And, yeah, once it hits, you're just like, all right, like, here we are. And then finally, the last song I wanted to talk about is a song called Hudson. And I wish I could say that this song was where we got the name of for our son.
Yeah.
However, this record came out 2 years after he was born.
Oh,
so
okay.
his name, as a side note, we actually I kind of got inspired from the song Marching Bands of Manhattan by Death Cab for Cutie. And they mentioned the Hudson, of course, talking about the Hudson River. And I was like, oh, Hudson. Anyway, so this song is called Hudson. I don't know what it has to do with Hudson, if it has anything to do with the Hudson River or anything. I don't know, or just someone named Hudson that they knew. This song's insane, though. It starts like an explosion. Like most songs I find on this record kind of gently lead you in. And this one, if I recall on the vinyl, it's actually the track 1 on side 2, which was weird to me because I assumed it would have been the last track on side 1, just the way the song ends. It kind of goes on with this huge outro that kind of drones and kind of goes just massive guitars and drums, and really would have felt like the way to end a side of a record, but instead it starts side 2, and side 2, the last few songs on the record kind of take more of a mellow feel to them, so it's extra weird that this song is leading into all of that. But I think the first few times I heard it, I was kind of like, what's going on with the end of this song? And then the more I listened to it, I was like, oh, the end of this song is incredible. It's just absolutely massive in scope, and it's beyond good. So I would definitely recommend checking out the self-titled album from Moving Mountains. The only problem is when you search it up, you're always going to get Usher. Usher has a song called Moving Mountains, so it's
the next best thing.
You always got to sift. Yeah, you got to sift through the Usher songs, but hey, this record is worth sifting through.
Yeah. You'll be listening to Usher and you'll be like, okay, it's got to be coming sometime.
Yeah. Where he was talking about this, it was so good, and all I'm hearing is R&B.
He said it's at the end of the song, so I'm just going to keep listening and wait for it to come.
It's eventually going to be here. I know it. But yeah, no, this easily one of, if not my all-time favorite record.
Awesome.
And this was one that I thought, I was like, I'm wondering what Aaron's going to think of this record, because it's going to be the one that's most outside of what we typically talk about as far as music is concerned on this show.
Yeah, it was definitely the hardest one for me to digest out of the 3. It wasn't. It was kind of a dreary day out today, and I was sifting through financial numbers at work and working on stuff. So it kind of fit okay. I kind of wasn't feeling amazing and had a headache, and so I was like, this kind of fits the mood. So. Yeah,
it works.
Yeah, like I said, it's probably not something I would go back to and listen to, but that's okay.
Yeah,
there's still lots of good to take away from it.
Yeah, I'd say if anyone who's a fan of maybe the Appleseed Cast sort of thing, especially Two Conversations era Appleseed Cast, that kind of stuff, give it a listen. But yeah, so I think, that's gonna wrap up us talking about the quarantine music that we want you to go listen to. We've rambled on for quite some time, though. So I don't know. Recording David right now is not sure if you're going to hear a clip at the end of this. You may hear 1 or 2 clips, but know that of other artists or podcasters suggesting albums. Know this: there is a ton of suggestions coming. In part 2 of this episode, I was blown away and surprised. So I'm going to say, to wrap up our end of this, thanks for checking out the show. Of course, during this time, definitely stay home. If you don't need to be going out, don't go out, all that kind of stuff. Listen to music. It's an opportunity to listen to tons of great music. And please tell your friends about the show. There's only one way to really spread this about, and that's you telling your friends. Share the show around. That would be fantastic. Even this episode to be like, yo, check out these records these guys are talking about. Maybe some good stuff to pick up here. Wherever you're listening to the podcast, rate it, review it, subscribe, that kind of stuff. And go follow us on our social medias, at Growing Punk Pod on both Instagram and Twitter, and you will find our personal Instagram and Twitters linked there as well. But without rambling on too much longer, that is going to do it. So bye-bye.
Yeah.
never here.
No, I was here. I followed the bug here. I've always been here.